a great question come in the other day all about how should I sequence my blocks of training? Should I do threshold before VO2? Should I do VO2 before threshold? How does it work? Are they the same? Are they different? And really what I wanted to make today's video about is just stepping back and taking a look at the bigger picture and getting a bit of perspective so that you can understand what's going to work best for you in terms of building out your training plan leading up to a race or leading up to a key event. Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome back to the channel, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. If you're brand new to the channel, make sure you consider subscribing down below. It really does help support the channel and keep the videos coming. And if you already are subscribed, maybe consider hitting the bell down below to turn on notifications and keep up to date with the latest videos as soon as they drop up here on YouTube. Like I said last week, I'm going to be trying to pump out a few more videos being in lockdown in Melbourne. So if you've got any questions or any videos done specific to your questions, leave them in the comments, but make sure you do turn on notifications so you know exactly when they do drop. Like I said in the intro, this video is all about just gaining a bit of perspective and allowing you guys to step back and understand, I guess, the macro side of things and look at the bigger picture. And why do I have such a big emphasis on this and why did I want to do a video on this is because I think at times a lot of athletes, coaches and practitioners, we get very caught up in the very specifics and also like the minor details, but then also we get very caught up in one way of thinking about getting to a goal or one way of thinking about getting to where we want to go, purely because that's worked for us in the past or that's worked for our athletes in the past and that must be working as a process. And what I want to do today is just highlight an example of an athlete who I was speaking to where we were basically talking in the same terms. It's just we were just one step out of sync. And if you remember back to the training zones video I did where I was comparing the 5-zone system that I use versus the Garmin 5-zone system versus a 7-zone system, you could see very clearly it's just a shift in where we're going. We're talking the same parts of physiology, we're talking the same things, but we've actually just shifted it a little bit to fit our terminology or to fit our mindset. And that's really what most of training is. And typically, I guess, and I'll put up on the screen maybe, the process that I go through in terms of leading into a race is I always start with where the race is to begin with. Where is our key event? What are we trying to achieve here? Because without defining that end point, we don't know how much time we've got necessarily. We don't know how much we've got to spend on each component of our physiology, etc. Then I start to work backwards. So I always start from the end, work backwards. I go, where's my race? Then I get into my taper. How long am I going to roughly be tapering for? Anywhere 10 to 14 days is typical, but I might go shorter depending on the event. Might go longer if it's a really long event, like a multi-day event, for example. Then we start to go, all right, what is the most specific preparation outside of just trying to recover and then going into the race? What's the most specific preparation I can do leading into that event? This is where things can differ a little bit because obviously if you're training for a sprint distance triathlon that's just over an hour in length, that's very different to training for an Ironman. And same for if you're a road racer versus preparing for a major crit racing event. We need to find out what is the most specific training for the event that you're going to be doing and racing as that primary focus. If you've got some mini events or some lead up events in there, I'm not talking about those. I'm just talking about that end goal event that we want to be peaked and fully prepared for. So we need to make sure, all right, am I doing the right things? Does this event involve lots of volume in terms of I'm doing an Ironman, I'm going to be out there for 10, 11, 12 hours, however long it's going to take you. So I need to make sure I keep up some volume and build the volume in the legs and start to peak that volume towards the back end of the program. Or is it a shorter distance event? So I really need to focus on FTP or just above FTP, and the intensity is a critical aspect. Is it a really short distance event like a 1500 meter on the track where it's all about top end VO2 intensity? That's going to be different to the threshold type intensity for a middle distance or a longer distance racer. So really just think about it as race specific. What do I need to be as race prepped and as specific to the needs and demands of the race as possible? And that's where you can really simply just look at the race and do what we call a needs analysis. What is my event? What are the specific qualities of the event that makes a successful racer or a successful athlete? How can I build those really specifically in the last 6 to 8 weeks of the program? Typically, sometimes out to 10, but I typically work on about 6 to 8 because you can generally get quite race fit and race specific in a very short period of time. So we're just tweaking and tuning and you're essentially just prepping yourself a little bit more and more to race. And you should have done all the hard work, I guess, leading into that, but then also as the starting part of that race specific component, you're really sort of well-rounded already. It's just the icing on the cake, if you like. Anything before that then essentially becomes what we call general preparation. So really, in theory, you could do anything to keep you aerobically fit or anything to build your aerobic fitness in general, whether that's building your VO2 max, so working on some really high intensity efforts and continuing to build some base Ks, whether it's main to focus on the base Ks because you're going from a shorter distance event, you're working your way up to a longer distance. Typical when we have athletes going from half marathon to marathon or 70.3 to full Ironman triathlon. Building the extra Ks is obviously going to be a big focus for you in that general prep. Maybe it's a case of your VO2 is quite good because you've been racing 1,500 meters on the track. You've been racing 5,000. And now we're trying to build you up to a half marathon and really thresholds that part that you need. Maybe we need to work a bit more on threshold in this general prep. There really isn't, a right or wrong. It's just understanding what your needs are. And then again, the needs are the event. But then looking at it from a more general perspective, we just need global adaptations here. And what I mean by that is we just need to get generally fitter. We can tune that fitness in the last 6 to 8 weeks and make it really specific. But we're just trying to build the overall engine as a starting point here. Now, for most athletes, I typically will recommend, mainly because of what we see in their physiology from a lab perspective when we do lab testing or we do field testing on them, we typically see that they're a little bit lacking in the aerobic side of things and a little bit lacking in the VO2. So that general preparation will typically be majorly long, slow base Ks in zone 2, long, slow distance, continuous training, whatever you want to call it, and some really high intensity apnea VO2 max to boost the top end of their engine and their aerobic power. Then as we get into race specific, it becomes a bit more about threshold. And then we go taper, race, etc. That's a typical progression, but a question that I had come through from the athlete I was talking about earlier is that they like to do their threshold stuff first because they feel like it allows them to push harder and it allows them to get more out of their VO2 stuff. And really what I want to maybe put up on the screen now is a sequence that I described to them, is that there's no necessarily right or wrong. As long as you're then getting to that end point and you're timing your run into the race correctly, you can have whatever sequence you like. And this is where I just use a very simple method of A, B, A, B. A being VO2 style stuff, working on the aerobic adaptations, and B working on more FTP threshold as a focus in your training blocks and how they alternate throughout. They're always going to be some sort of alternating structure of those. It's just if you start on an A structure and go A, B, A, B, someone else might start on B and then go to A and then B, A, B, A. If we just shift those and move them by one, we end up matching up. So it's the type of thing, as long as you time your run into the event, you're probably going to be doing very similar sort of stuff. But it's more about, if you can think about that instead of VO2 threshold, think about that as general preparation, specific preparation, or and we're just trying to, all right, what couple of blocks in that A-B sequence are going to be the general prep, and then what couple of those blocks are going to be the more specific prep, and then maybe am I doubling up in a couple of blocks? Really, we're overall, again, I can't drive it home enough, is we're really overall just trying to look at the big picture first, break down the components, and then work off this general preparation into the specific stuff. So as we get close to the event, we start out really wide, we come closer and closer and closer and closer in, we taper, we race, we're ready to go. So hopefully that's answered that question, and hopefully it's cleared it up for a little bit of you in terms of my thought processes behind building towards a race and structuring a total plan, looking at the macro and the big picture. Do you have any questions about looking at the big picture? Do you follow a particular structure when you're leading up to a race, or how do you think about planning for a race? Let me know in the comments down below. Like I said at the beginning of the video, really appreciate the support on the channel, so make sure you do hit the subscribe button down below, turn the notifications on by clicking the bell, and that is it for today, so we'll see you in the next one.